Alert! Alert! The following subject is restricted to the Pro Football Central radio network. No Tim Tebow talk. Thank you.
This is Bengals Central Podcast, keeping you up to date on all the Bengals news. Brought to you by ProFootballCentral.com. And now, here are your hosts, Sean O'Donnell and Chris Rowling.
Welcome to the Bengals Central Podcast, found exclusively on the Pro Football Central radio network and brought to you by Onnit.com, delivering everything you need to thrive. I'm your host, Sean O'Donnell, and with me as always, my co-host, Chris Rowling. Chris, it appears that we have some rather interesting developments to delve into this week.
That we do, Sean. It's a dead of the off-season, but there are a few news items we need to discuss, as I'm sure you're all aware. We'll also start previewing Cincinnati's AFC North opposition by bringing on Yahoo columnist and Dawg Pound Central host Mike Hoag to talk some Cleveland Browns football. After that, we'll roll right into our mailbag session, thanks to you, the listener. Sean, lead us off with the news.
Well, we've got some rather interesting news this week. It's time of the year for the Bengals mandatory minicamp. It extends for 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of this week. And already we have some interesting news that has come about. First off, Andre Smith, newly re-signed right tackle. He's a no-show. Last week, Marvin Lewis stated in a press conference that he truly believed that Andre Smith would be at the mandatory minicamp this week. And now it's gone 180 and Andre Smith isn't there. Now Marvin Lewis gives a press conference that Andre Smith is still dealing with personal issues, is what he's calling them. The only really thing that he has said about the situation to the media is that it's not related to the weapons incident at the airport where Smith was arrested. Marvin Lewis has said it's not in regards to that. But that just leaves us with so many other things to speculate on because it is Andre Smith, and this is what he does. So first off, Marvin Lewis did say that it didn't have anything to do with a death in the family or a marriage or the birth of a child or anything like that, things that are, that are admissible in this kind of situation. So there are consequences, and those consequences right now for Andre Smith is that he is being fined. He will be fined roughly $68,000 for missing the mandatory minicamp, as well as he will lose out on a $100,000 workout bonus that is part of his contract for 2013. So that being said, it just basically leads us to speculate on why Smith isn't at minicamp right now. You could go the injury route and you could say, he's had that nagging foot injury and things like that. But, I really don't think it's an injury issue. If it was an injury issue, that's very common at this stage of the game. Obviously, there's plenty of Bengals at the minicamp right now that are having to sit on the sidelines and rehab, guys like Andrew Whitworth, who had the scope during the off season, and that leaves me basically, I think, with two other options, Chris, unless you can think of something that I haven't thought of just yet. But that leaves me to be with one: either his conditioning is terrible still right now, and Marvin Lewis thought that it would be better by now, because there were reports over the off season that Smith may have let himself go a little bit. Or maybe he has gotten himself into some kind of new trouble that we haven't heard of yet. I'm leaning more towards the former because I think we would have heard about the latter. So I'm going to go with a conditioning thing. That's my guess. Marvin Lewis did say and I think I'm quoting him on this, where he said he's been monitoring Smith's conditioning from afar. I'm not really sure how you monitor conditioning from afar if you don't have the guy working right in front of you. So that's what I'm thinking it is, and I'm thinking Marvin Lewis is trying to keep word about Smith's conditioning out of the media, and, because they love to sink their teeth into stories like that. So I'm thinking, he's kind of keeping him out of sight until he can get himself back into shape and work with the team. But, of course, that's just speculation. That's all I can do right now on that. Chris, what's your take on this whole Andre Smith fiasco?
Actually, it's a non-story in my mind, just like it would be if it was somebody like Andrew Whitworth. I think that Smith has shown in the past to not be the sharpest tool in the shed, and I can say that because he brought a gun to an airport, and that's why this is making headlines. But, you know, I don't think he's the type of guy that's going to miss out on almost $200,000 in money, even after signing an $18 million deal over 3 years this offseason. I just don't think he'd miss that type of money, even if he was out of shape. Marvin Lewis is known for being vague in press conferences. He likes to pull a Bill Belichick and pretend that he's secretive. But in the past, he's pretty much called a spade and said Smith is out of shape or Smith is injured. I think there's something else at play here that may not be football related, and I could be entirely wrong. But, you know, we're talking about Smith missing almost $200,000 for 3 practices. And I really hope he's not that lazy. I think there's something else here. And if we're talking about impact on the rest of the year, it's also a non-story because this is getting reps to some of the guys that are younger and getting them more experience. And Smith isn't missing anything that's going to impact his ability to play to the level he did last year. It could be a conditioning or injury issue, but I think in this situation, Lewis is doing more of a disservice by being vague when he could just say he's out of shape. And that's my 2 cents on it, but this is going to be something to watch because the media loves these types of things, especially in Cincinnati. Another thing the media loves is when Adam Jones gets in trouble, and that has actually happened again. After a few years out of the spotlight, Adam Jones was involved in an altercation last week with a female patron at a bar. Jones allegedly struck the woman in the face after she poured a drink on him. You can actually see in the video, he didn't, cock back and deliver a Vander Holyfield blow or anything, but he did strike toward her. He has pled not guilty, and this is a much bigger story. Jones is a guy slated to have a major impact as a corner next year, as the number 3 corner, potentially behind Leon Hall and Drake Kirkpatrick. With his arrest history in the past, this could play into a suspension or something of that nature. He's already been nursing a calf injury, and now he's in trouble off the field again. If he so much as says the wrong thing, I think Goodell is going to look for a reason to suspend him. So this is a major storyline. I'm not a judge. I can't tell you how it's going to go. He was allegedly struck first with the woman's drink, but I can't tell you how it's going to play out. Sean, what are your thoughts on the Adam Jones bar brawl?
Well, it's not good usually when you're hearing the words, Adam Jones bar and news all in the same sentence. That's kind of been how it was in the past, and Adam Jones has really done a terrific job, I've got to say, in the past couple of years, really getting himself turned around and, kind of making a better life for himself. But apparently, I don't know if I can say that he's slipped up because we really don't know how this will all shake out. I did watch the video, and you can see clearly that there's an altercation. It looks like the female pours a beer over his head or on his shoulder or something like that. And he kind of, gives her a slap, which might be maybe just a natural reflex, I guess, or something. But the problem is that I find with it is that there's a fence in between both of them. He's on the outside of it and she's on the inside. And he could have easily just taken a couple steps back and completely avoided that incident altogether, which, in my mind, that's where I think that a guy with a history like that should be going at that point. I mean, you can't afford to get into any kind of trouble, even if he turns out to not be at fault, because now he's on the radar right now. He slips up in the most minor way, people are going to be looking for it now. And he's put himself back on the radar, and that's just something he can't afford to do. And you're right, he's a pivotal role in the Bengals defense coming up this year as the slot cornerback, as the third guy. He was tremendous last year in that position, as well as a punt returner. And he would be a guy that the Bengals would very sorely miss if he indeed ended up missing some time because of this. So we'll have to keep a very close eye on this. As you said, this is very big news actually for the Bengals right now, and depending on how this shakes out, could determine a lot of interesting developments as far as how the Bengals react and what they do with the roster before they make their final cuts to get down to 53 guys. So speaking of Bengals in the news, the media really like to use the word former Bengal or ex-Bengal whenever they're referring to a Bengal or somebody that has been a Bengal at some point in their lives whenever they get into trouble, because we all remember the years such as 2006 where there were multiple arrests for multiple different players on the Cincinnati Bengals. Well, the news that has come about this week is an ex-Bengals cheerleader. I'm not sure if everybody remembers the incident with Sarah Jones. She was involved with a 17-year-old student of hers and pleaded guilty to sexual abuse. Well, she's engaged to that same teenager now, who I believe is 19 now, so he is of age. However, the media is drumming up the headlines by constantly keeping her name in the same sentence as the Cincinnati Bengals. It's always ex-Bengals cheerleader Sarah Jones. It's not former teacher Sarah Jones or anything of that matter. And it's funny and it's almost saddening how the media really has to use something like a team name and really aren't afraid to tarnish the image of a team even after years of really good behavior, should I say. And now, again, talking about being back on the radar with, Adam Jones's incident, and now this Sarah Jones thing's coming back around. I mean, it's like it's 2006 all over again, and here come the bad Bengals headlines that we all, loved to read back in, about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and, they're all coming back around. And, Chris, what's your thought on the media and using the Bengals name to gain headlines and to gain reads?
Well, it's unfortunate that Cincinnati as a franchise put themselves in those types of situations with player personnel decisions earlier in the 2000s. That being said, it's also unfortunate that the media continues to live in the past. It's the same reason Andre Smith is a story, because he's had negative connotations to him before. It's the same reason, Adam Jones is such a popular topic, and anything he does is literally a headline. With Sarah Jones, I don't really have a comment on her case or relationship, but the fact that we're using Cincinnati Bengals and cheerleader as keywords, even though she hasn't been a cheerleader for a while, if I remember correctly, it's a sad state of affairs, but it's the way the industry is, and it's not going to stop. It's the same reason Tim Tebow is being covered like he's an MVP candidate when he's a number 5 quarterback on the New England Patriots roster, and potentially not even playing the quarterback position. It's unfortunate, and, until this case dies away, the Bengals are going to continue to be associated with Sarah Jones when she wasn't even actually a player on the team. So, speaking of bad Bengals headlines, we have one of the Bengals' greatest players of all time, that sounds strange saying, in Chad Johnson making bad headlines, and you better believe the Cincinnati Bengals keyword is on every article, not New England Patriots or anywhere else. Mr. Johnson slapped an attorney's butt in I can't even remember what kind of case he was having. He was in court, and he slapped his attorney's butt, and the female judge believed he was treating it almost like a football field type attitude and sentenced him to 30 days in prison. I'm going to have to side with the judge on this one. Ocho, I guess as we can call him, was once again allowing his ego to shine through, this time in a courtroom. And it cost him 30 days of his freedom. That's all I really have to say about that. That is Ocho, or Chad, being Chad. Sean, thoughts?
Yeah, it's all I can really do is laugh at the situation, not because it's funny what Chad Johnson did in slapping the butt of his attorney, but just, thinking what must be going through that man's head when he's doing that in a courtroom. Really, I wouldn't even begin to, I couldn't fathom really, the kind of frame of mind that you have to be in to do such a thing in that type of environment. On the sidelines with a teammate is perfectly normal, and that's perfectly fine, and I'm sure it's even encouraged. However, in a courtroom, when you're facing some serious charges, not the best venue for that sort of behavior. 30 days in prison, I think, well-deserved for Mr. Johnson after his actions. He apparently did not take it as seriously as he should have, and he's paying the consequences for it. And really, that's all there is to say about that. So we'll see you in a month, Mr. Ocho Cinco. Next up on Bengals Central is our weekly interview segment, and this week, could it be possible that we have a writer of the Cleveland Browns coming up next?
Warning, the following guest is on enemy territory. Warning, the following guest is on enemy territory. Beware.
Bengals Central would like to give a warm welcome to Mike Hoag, a very talented writer of the Cleveland Browns, and the new host of Dawg Pound Central, the Cleveland Browns Central podcast on the Pro Football Central radio network. Mike, thanks so much for coming on the show. How are you doing today?
Hey, Sean, I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
We're doing great here, man. We're excited to have you on. We got some great Browns and AFC North stuff to talk to you about, and as well as your new podcast. How's that been going so far for you?
It's been pretty solid. We've had a pretty good response so far. We interviewed Chris Openeye last week, the running back, third string for the Browns, and today we had David Nelson, the new wide receiver from Buffalo.
That's great. Sounds like you guys are off to a pretty legit start right there, and we're really looking forward to some more content from you. Let's move right into the Q&A session here. Chris, go ahead and take it away, Cor.
Sure thing. So, Mike, basically we have to start with the off-season and draft talk before we get into looking into next year. Paul Kruger and Desmond Bryant were the big names for the Browns in free agency. Barkevius Mingo was the headliner for the draft. What are your thoughts so far on the Browns off-season and draft?
I think that the new regime has come in and they've added some very key pieces that complemented with the talent that was already on the roster. I think that Michael Lombardi has went out and got some players that can really be effective in the schemes that Norv Turner and Ray Horton are going to employ this season. I think that it's hard to imagine where this team would be if the change hadn't been made, but I think that it's definitely going in the right direction with the additions they've made.
And that's great that it's going in the right direction there for the Browns. This is getting it to be a very stacked division in the AFC North, and teams are kind of getting a lot closer together. Now, what do you think the Browns' next step is to become a contender in the division?
Like I said, they've got the new schemes coming in with Horton and Turner, and in theory, the coaching that they have is top notch. All they need to do now is execute on the field and make sure that the players that they have are the guys they need to reach the goals that they're setting for themselves. And I think it's going to take a little bit of time, maybe a little bit more time than everybody wants and hope. This season is going to be, it could be a surprise, but it could be another 4 or 5 win season. And I don't think a lot of people want to hear that, but it all depends on players staying healthy because there's not depth at a lot of key positions. And if they can stay healthy and they can get some good like familiarity with each other, I think that they can win some ball games. But like you said, AFC North is pretty much the best division in the AFC from top to bottom. So they're going to need to overcome the other teams, like the Bengals, especially, who are on the rise, the Steelers, who are still there, and the Ravens, who are defending champs. They're not just going to overnight win 4 out of their 6 division games every year with a winning record. It's going to take time, and it's going to take getting the right guys in the positions like the quarterback. We still don't know what's going to happen with Brandon Weeden. Think that he's going to do better. He's going to take the next step in the new offense with Norv Turner calling the shots. But that just might not end up happening. We might need to wait and reevaluate at the end of next year.
Speaking of next year, Mike, the Battle of Ohio is always one of the most physical contests twice a year that we see. That being said, what are some of the player personnel matchups that you're looking forward to? Because personally, I think what's slowly becoming a classic is the battle between Joe Hayden and A.J. Green, but I'm very interested to see the Bengals offensive tackles, Andrew Whitworth and Andre Smith, versus the new guys for the Browns in the new scheme with Paul Kruger and Barkevious Mingo. Which matchups do you stand out as we head towards these two contests in 2013?
I think the outside linebacker matchup is definitely going to be interesting, especially with the additions you guys made at the tight end position. They're not when they're not rushing the passer and trying to get at Andy Dalton, they're going to need to be dropping back in the coverage. And Jamal Sheard is very untested in that department, as is Barkevious Mingo. So if Cincinnati can use some favorable matchups by getting Tyler Eifert out in the open field against one of those guys, I think it's going to be a problem for the Browns. Just as Jermaine Gresham has been in the past.
And that's a good point there. And as Bengals guys, we know how it can be insanely difficult and detrimental to a team if you have guys that struggle or are unfamiliar with covering a tight end that can stretch the field, because Cincinnati has been burned by the likes of Owen Daniels on multiple occasions, and other guys with his similar skill set. And switching it over to the outside of the field on defense here at cornerback. I mean, we all know that Joe Hayden is obviously elite at that position. But what can we expect across from Hayden in 2013? And do you think the front office has substantially filled that gaping hole at the number 2 cornerback spot?
That's a really good question. I think that they're taking a wait-and-see approach right now. They've got a couple of guys who they want to try to fit into that spot, but it's going to be an ongoing competition throughout training camp and into the preseason. Maybe not even until the end of the preseason will the Browns have solidified that. Buster Screen was a liability at times last season when he was in that role. He called for a lot of penalties. He got beat. He's got the speed and toughness to play nickel, and he can step up and make tackles, but playing with the bigger receivers on the outside, he's at a really big disadvantage. And throughout minicamp, he's been rotating in and out of there with Chris Owens from Atlanta. And the knock on Owens has been the same thing throughout his career. He's never really been able to stand up and be that number 2 guy. He was actually benched from the number 3 role in Atlanta last season early on, and he never really got another shot. There's been a lot of good reviews from him this offseason so far, but he hasn't really been in game situations yet, and I don't really feel comfortable. I doubt a lot of people would feel comfortable with having him be there at the number 2. But we do have a draft pick, which is still a little bit of an unknown, in Leon McFadden, and he's a little bit in the same mold of Buster Screen. He's a little bit bigger, and he's a little bit more physical at the line of scrimmage. And I think in the end, he'll end up playing number 2 cornerback. It might not be right away from opening day, but I think that he'll work his way into that role because he's got the speed, the toughness, and at San Diego State, they had him playing on an island a lot. He's got experience doing that, matching up against number 1 and number 2 receivers. So in the end, I think that's who you'll expect to see when the Browns come to town.
And Mike, let's stay focused on the defense for a little while longer here. And I'm sure you may contest this, but in my opinion, on paper, the Browns have one of the best front sevens in football right now. I love the addition of Desmond Bryant. I love Phil Taylor and Rubin in the trenches. I think Kruger and Mingo, behind them, an amazing leader in DeQuell Jackson, makes it a very mean front, but obviously it all has to gel via coaching. How do you see this new-look defense coming together this year? Is it a unit that's going to keep them in games and help the offense along, similar to what's been happening in Cincinnati the past few years?
I think that the interior of the linebacker core is where the strength of that front is going to actually come from. And people talk about, like you said, Kruger, Shear, Desmond Bryant, and then the new guys and the guys on the outside that are going to be rushing the passer. But Ray Horton does a lot of inside blitzing with his middle linebackers. And right now they have DeQuell Jackson, with a Pro Bowl tackler when he's not injured and when he plays the full season. He's a really formidable force in the middle of the D. But Craig Robertson next to him, I think, is a guy that flew under the radar last season, and he played pretty well when he had the opportunity. He was primarily in nickel formations last year next to Jackson. And if Horton uses him like he uses middle linebackers in Arizona, we're going to see a lot of Craig Robertson coming up the middle. And his ability to get through offensive lines and get to the quarterback as well as fill holes and stop the running game, I think is going to be one of the keys to that success. I think that, like you said, they're going to be getting after the quarterback, and that's what Ray Horton does. He's aggressive. He sends blitzes from everywhere. But if they can't stop the run and if they can't get good play out of Jackson and Robertson, I don't think it's going to end up being as successful as people think it is.
That all makes sense, absolutely. And, with a new staff in there, you almost kind of have to take a wait-and-see approach to these types of things. And that being said, I'm going to totally go ahead and contradict myself right now because we obviously don't know how the four AFC North teams are really going to look this year. There's a lot of teams that are kind of rehabbing from injury, teams like the Browns who have just revamped a new coaching staff, teams like the Steelers who kind of always, tend to stick around, but we don't know if their, age is finally catching up to them like everybody has thought in the last couple of years, or if they're still going to be, right up there and contending like always. And then there's the Ravens who are coming off of the Super Bowl win, who kind of had a lot of comings and goings as far as free agency goes. All of that being said, Mike, how do you think the competitiveness of the AFC North will be this season? How closely contested do you think this division will be throughout 2013?
I think that it's going to be like it is normally every season. There's going to be two top teams that pretty much control the division. There'll be a middle team, and there'll be a team significantly at the bottom, whether that's the Browns or if the Steelers have an off season. They play too many tough games against each other for everybody to have a great season. And like you said, the Steelers, they've gone through a lot of changes. They're getting older. Ben Roethlisberger is hurt, and we've been waiting for the downfall of the Steelers for probably like the best 10 seasons. We've been anticipating every year. This is going to be the year where it all comes undone. They didn't make the playoffs last year, so this year they might even get worse. They have been drafting solid for who knows how long. I don't remember the last time that people have given them a negative grade on their draft. They've always been able to fill the holes and somehow keep the winnings alive despite, like we said, the aging and uncertainty with Ben Roethlisberger. And as far as the Ravens go, they did lose a lot of people, like you said. There were some coming and goings, but they've added a lot of high-quality players in the gaps positions that they've lost. So you can't totally discredit the Ravens and think that there's going to be any drop-off there because of the excellent coaching staff and because of the players they actually do still have won a Super Bowl last season. So the biggest question mark for me, other than the Browns, will be how Andy Dalton and the Bengals handle those two defenses. And if Dalton can throw the ball down the field more effectively, I think that the Bengals are in the position to get to that level where the Ravens are at. I don't know if it's going to be an AFC North division title. I think that they'll be in contention for it, but I ultimately think it'll end up shaping up like Ravens, Bengals, Steelers, Browns, and that's how I see it this year. Nice.
So Ravens, Bengals, Steelers, Browns. That's your top four for how the division is going to be shaken out then in 2013.
Yeah, that's how I think it'll go down this year.
All right. I can see that. And the thing with the AFC North is, it's so difficult to predict every single season, going in and out, because some teams just, absolutely dominate the division, but, really can't get it done in other phases of the game. They'll lose some games to, the NFC North or whatever, have some letdown games. It's funny because it's so hard to predict each and every year. But I like that prediction, and, and so basically it looks like it might end up shaking out almost the same way as 2012 did. If there were any major changes, I think, and I like what you said earlier about the Browns and that it's true. There's a possibility that they could have another, 4 or 5 win season, that type of deal. But I think they have enough talent on that team where they're, slightly better quarterback play away and, just a little bit of a different mindset on the offensive side of the ball to really get in the mix up there. So, it wouldn't surprise me either if the Browns were able to leapfrog a team or two here in the AFC North this coming season. And then, Chris, we've got the one more question, I believe, for Mr. Hoag here that has to do with the two teams being represented on the show right now.
That we do. We have the big question that I think everyone's been waiting to hear. Obviously, Mike, the teams meet in Week 4 in Cleveland and Week 11 in Cincinnati. How do you see the series playing out next season?
I think in Week 4, the Browns might be riding pretty high after getting Josh Gordon back in Week 3. In Cleveland, I think it's possible that they'll take a game out of the series there. Like we've been saying, there's so many variables that are still going to change before opening day, so it's hard to call right now. But with Trent Richardson presumably healthy and Josh Gordon back, North Turner and Rob Jasinski's offense, I think that they'll be able to put up some points against the Bengals and against that. They'll be able to put points up, basically, is what I'm trying to say, against anybody this season. So at home with a lot of energy and a fresh new season still, I think that they'll take that game out of the series. But later on in the year, after there's injuries, it's really hard to predict what will happen in Week 11. I think that going down to Paul Brown Stadium is a pretty difficult thing to do and go win a ball game. The Browns have done it, but I'm going to go with the safe pick and say we're going to split, and each team's going to win their home game.
Yeah, that makes everybody happy there, I guess. It's and that's actually, it might be the safe pick, but it's also a very, very logical pick. It's what the teams did last year. I expect both teams to be improved this year, and the Browns, they had a great off season, so it's certainly not out of the question for these teams to split in 2013. And Mike, man, those were some pretty terrific answers that you gave us today. We're all much more well-informed about the division rival Cleveland Browns than we were just a little bit ago. Mike, let all of the listeners know where they can find you, where they can find your writing, the Browns podcast, the whole shebang.
You can check out my writing at Bleacher Report or Yahoo Sports. I contribute about the Browns there. And Dawg Pound Central is also located on the Pro Football Central Network. Our Twitter handle is DAWGPND Central. And my Twitter handle is Mike, HOAG JR. Very cool, man. And, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really implore everybody to give you a follow. I personally obviously follow you on Twitter, and you're a great follow. Really fun to chat with, very informative, and your stuff about football. And the Browns show is taking off and doing great things, and we're really looking forward to hearing more of that in the very near future. So, Mike, thank you once again for coming on the show. We really appreciate it, man. Hey, Sean, thanks a lot. I hope to get you guys over there on Dawg Pound Central as well.
Football fans, looking to get healthy this year? Now is the time, and I have the perfect place for you. Save 10% at onit.com/football radio. Exclusive PFC radio listeners save 10% off their order. That's onit.com, ONNIT.com/football radio.
Let's move along now to our weekly mailbag segment where we answer your questions that you send to us at our Twitter account at BengalsCentral. If you want to get involved with the show, hit us up on Twitter, and we'll gladly answer whatever questions you may have for us, whether it's Bengals or NFL or overall related. Sean, why don't you lead us in with the first question?
Sounds great, Chris. Our first question we have today is from Ron, MLXFL Commish, and you can find Ron at MLXFL on Twitter. And Ron asks, who will fill the run stuffer role that Pat Sims filled the past 2 years? Well, Ron, that player this season will be second-year player Brandon Thompson. Brandon Thompson will be filling in behind Doma Tepeko at the nose tackle position, and that is primarily the position where Pat Sims has played on running downs for the past couple of seasons in Cincinnati. And, the loss of Pat Sims is, I think, going to be larger than most fans realize, because the Cincinnati run defense was very, very good when he was on the field and allowed a significant yard per carry average decrease when he was part of that line. So look for second-year guy Brandon Thompson to fill in. He and other second-year player, defensive tackle Devin Still, did not get a lot of playing time last year after a couple early snaps as the rotation was rather deep, and they really weren't needed. So they're going to have to do a lot of work in training camp in the preseason this year to really get themselves prepared. But Brandon Thompson, he's going to be the guy that you're going to be watching to rotate with Pecco and stopping the run on the defensive line. What's your thoughts on the defensive tackle run stuffer role, Chris?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank Ron for actually mentioning Pat Sims, because in my mind that's one of the most critical storylines of this season is his loss and how efficient he was in running situations. Cincinnati's now expecting a second-year player in Brandon Thompson, to come in on running downs, like you said, and combine with either Pecco or Atkins and stop the run. And that could be asking a lot for someone in his position. For me, there's nothing else behind Thompson, and Still is more of a Geno Atkins mold at the right defensive tackle spot, who's more of a pass rusher than a run stuffer. Thompson's your guy, and they're asking a lot, but they must have enough faith in him, because they could have easily brought back Pat Sims with the amount of cap space that they had. So, yeah, the last 2 years have been great, but they've also been on and off with Pat Sims because of injury. So Thompson's got some pretty big boots to fill, whether folks realize it or not. We'll switch gears here. Our next question actually involves the offense, and it comes from Jesse Reed, a Bleacher Report featured columnist. You can find him at JesseReed78. And he wants to know whether or not Andy Dalton will take the necessary steps next year to take full advantage of his loaded arsenal of skill position players. It's a great question, really, and one everyone's been asking because of the additions of Tyler Eifert and Giovanni Bernard. For Dalton to fully take advantage of his crop of ridiculous skill position players, he's going to have to be more comfortable in the pocket, know when to get rid of the ball, and just get rid of it faster than he did last year. And I think that we're looking at him finally taking that step in his third year, which is kind of typically the time when quarterbacks produce the most that they're going to produce based on their talent. And, for Dalton, he now has two huge tight ends in Gresham and Eifert. He's got a change of pace back. He's got a power back. He's got arguably the best receiver in the NFL, and he's got a swath of number 2 wide receivers who are interchangeable in all the different positions. For me, I think that his iffy pocket presence is something that can be addressed with coaching. More consistency along the offensive line will help with that. And I think guys like Kevin Zeitler, who was already one of the top guards in the NFL last year, is going to take another step and help with that consistency to keep him more comfortable in the pocket. And, yeah, I think Dalton next year is going to take another step. He wasn't bad statistically last year. He was bad at accuracy deep and just knowing when to get rid of the ball. I think in the confines of this offense, finally having a West Coast offense type back who can catch and run is going to do wonders for him, and that alone, in my mind, is going to allow him to take the next step along with his development. Sean, thoughts on Dalton's steps to take advantage?
Yeah, I guess there's two ways that Dalton can take the necessary steps to take full advantage of his skill position players in 2013. Well, one of them is his skill position players allowing him to take the next step in his game. And what I mean by that is Dalton really hasn't been blessed with a full arsenal of these type of players in his first 2 years. Yes, he's had A.J. Green both years, but it's hard to get it done when you have a fantastic target, but it really is your only target. Jermaine Gresham is a great athlete at tight end. He's struggling with drops, and he's a little inconsistent as a route runner. There's been, I don't know how many different players at the second wide receiver position since Dalton's been there. I want to say 5 or 6 now in 2 years, which is not a good sign. And he hasn't had any kind of a receiving threat out of the backfield at all. His first year, he had Cedric Benson back there, and then last year, solely Ben Jarvis Green-Ellis for the most part. So adding Tyler Eifert, adding Giovanni Bernard, bringing back a healthy Mohamed Sanu, and Marvin Jones that is now comfortable with the offense will do wonders for Dalton coming up in 2013. And I think their presence will help him take advantage of their presence, if that makes really any kind of sense here. But as far as Dalton handling things on his own, Chris, I believe you and I each wrote articles about Andy Dalton lately, and I think we touched on the same things. And one, as you mentioned just a little bit ago, is Dalton handling pressure, and his pocket awareness basically all comes into play. Dalton was awful under pressure last year. Pro Football Focus gave him a negative 10.5 grade when he was pressured, compared to a positive 10.4 without any pressure. Now that's night and day right there. And a lot of that really has to come with his pocket awareness. He hasn't really done that great of a job seeing where the defenders are around him, seeing pockets collapsing, seeing the defenders close on him, and along with his tendency to hold on to the ball a little too long, as he was sacked 48 times last year, and there's a reason for that. And one thing that he needs to do is he needs to quickly advance through his read progression a little bit better, and not stare down his first target, and try to tuck the ball away if he's not open. And finally, as you mentioned, Chris, the deep ball, it's been an issue with his accuracy. They've been working on that, quickening his drop back and switching up his trajectory when he throws the deep ball. So far, reports are that they're making strides with it, but we'll have yet to the jury will be out until we see it in action on game day. But yes, I think Dalton can take the steps to use the amount of talent that he's going to have around him this year. I think we're going to see an improved Andy Dalton in 2013. It's just a matter of how much improved will he be over the 2012 version. And speaking of another one of those weapons that Dalton should have at his disposal this season, Rob Bergeron sends us a question. Actually, he ends up sending us multiple questions, and we thank him for that because we love answering these. You can find Rob on Twitter at Robert Bergeron, and his last name is spelled Bergeron. And Rob asks, do you think Orson Charles has a real opportunity to shine with the addition of Eifert? Well, so basically, Rob obviously knows that we have Jermaine Gresham sitting there as the incumbent starter. We have Eifert coming in as a rookie. The Bengals still have Alex Smith, who they brought on as a free agent. And we also have last year's draft pick, Orson Charles. And I kind of view Orson Charles a little bit differently than I view the rest of the tight ends on the Cincinnati Bengals. Jermaine Gresham and Tyler Eifert I view as tight ends. They'll be in line, tight to the line, or split out wide. They're very athletic, and they'll be used to stretch the field, up the seam, what have you. Orson Charles, I fully believe, will be used more as an H-back type of player this year, and that will allow him to shine with the rest of the tight ends on the field, because I think Orson Charles will be used differently than the other tight ends out there. Charles played H-back in Georgia, and H-back is basically a hybrid between a tight end and a fullback. So Charles will have the ability to line up either tight to the line, split out wide, or in the backfield in the traditional fullback position, and he'll be able to be utilized as a receiver from multiple different areas on the field, and I think he'll be a great security blanket for Andy Dalton because he's very sure hands, and I think he'll be very solid in those positions. Orson Charles isn't the biggest guy, but pound for pound, he's probably one of the better blockers on the team. And I think he's going to thrive as an H-back if that's how the Bengals decide that they want to use him, even with Gresham and Eifert on the field at the same time. Chris, what are your thoughts on Charles?
Well, for me, it depends on how you define the word shine. If you talk if you're saying major statistical output, I don't think you're going to see that from Charles. There's just not enough balls to go around. There's 3 or 4 receivers who could have a big impact next year, and there's 2 tight ends in front of him that could have a major impact, not to mention a running back in Giovanni Bernard who's going to act as the major safety blanket for Dalton when things break down in the pocket. For me, shine and the word Orson Charles means he's going to catch a few passes here and there as a safety option and perform well, but more importantly, he's going to act in a hybrid role that confuses defenses, and like you said, he's a very effective blocker. So having him in there, he'll get a few touchdowns in the red zone, but more importantly, he'll be an effective blocker and be able to take some attention off of the other targets like Green and Eifert and Gresham, because defenses are going to have a hard time, diagnosing whether he's going to go out for a pass or he's going to stay in and block for the running back. Next, we will switch gears here and talk defense for the rest of the questions. We have another question from Rob. He wants to know if there's any chance Vontaze Burfict moves to Mike linebacker, because Rob thinks that he'd be even more of a presence there. And, Rob, I have to tell you I agree 100%. Unfortunately, we're not in control of the player personnel decisions. The coaching staff is primarily responsible for that. I personally think Vontaze could get moved to the middle of the defense and Ray Maualuga get demoted or move to the strong side. But all of that literally depends on how good Emmanuel Lemur performs leading up to the preseason and during the preseason. If Lemur can come in and win the starting weak side linebacker job, that means Vontaze Burfict gets slid over to the middle of the defense, and then the Bengals coaching staff has to choose between James Harrison and Ray Maualuga on the strong side, and actually I think that's a battle Maualuga could win. So there's no question that I think Burfict is the absolute best option at Mike linebacker next year, but the real question within this question is how Lemur emerges and how he plays, and if he can be an every down player. If I had to give a prediction, I'd say yes, Burfict is in the middle from week 1, but the jury's going to be out for a while because we don't know enough about Lemur. Sean, what are your thoughts about Vontaze in the middle?
Yeah, I actually agree with you 100% on bringing in Emmanuel Lemur to this conversation because I believe that Vontaze Burfict, you look at his physicality and his skill set, and he is a middle linebacker. That's what he does. He's not built for the weak side. He's just so good. He's so athletic. He can do it. But he's not a typical weak side backer. Not the way that he's built. He's a Mike through and through. So if Lemur would be able to come in and take over on the weak side as an every down player, which I do believe he will be able to, because word out of OTAs this year is Lemur is yet again turning heads and impressing players and staff alike. He's even put on, I think, about 12 pounds over the off season, so he's gotten himself heavier because, he wants to shed the label as just being a coverage guy or a nickel backer. He wants to be in there every down, and from what I hear, he's been working very hard at doing so. So if he can keep shining throughout the rest of minicamp here and training camp to preseason, I think we could see a possible shift here, which puts Lemur in there on the weak side, which moves Burfict over to the middle, and then, as Chris pointed out, you're going to have a battle then for the strong side between Maualuga and Harrison. And personally, I would love to see a committee over there, so to speak, on the strong side between Maualuga and Harrison. Malaluga has shown nice glimpses in his first couple of seasons over on the strong side, and he's a lot younger than Harrison, and he still has a very high motor, whereas Harrison does a couple of things better than Malaluga over on that side. I think Harrison's a much better blitzer. He can shed blocks a lot better, and he's tremendous against the run, whereas Malaluga tends to struggle sometimes. But I think you can find the right situations for Malaluga over on the strong side, and I think those two can be utilized together in the right system very nicely over there. So, I'd love to see Burfict in the middle. I think that there is a chance that it happens. However, I also think that would have to happen rather quickly, because I think the coaching staff would want to see him work in that position at least a couple of times in the preseason before they make a final decision about it, before the regular season begins. But it's a great question, and we'll have to wait and see how it all shakes out. So Rob is going to ask another question for us here coming up next, and this is also staying in line with the Bengals linebackers, and we've pretty much covered this for the most part on the last question, Chris, so I'm going to make this one just really quick here. And Rob asks, does Emmanuel Lemur have a chance of beating out Harrison for the starting role? And, well, the problem is that we get here is that these guys play two entirely different positions. Lemur is the weak side linebacker, and Harrison is the strong side. So basically from what we were just saying is that Lemur would have to emerge on the weak side to take Vontaze Burfict, his position there, and have Burfict move to the middle, which would force Malaluga then to move to the strong side, and then Malaluga and Harrison would end up having the competition there for the starting role on the strong side. So if Lemur does emerge over there, and that does happen, Malaluga and Harrison would be the battle. And as Chris said, and I agree with this, is that, Malaluga has a possible chance of beating out Harrison in that role. I personally, I'm going to stick with what I said about I'd love to see a kind of a committee approach over there, but that would be the battle that you would actually see if that situation were to arise. What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
I think, we're seeing a lot of confusion as of late with exactly where James Harrison will play, and I think that's a credit to his versatility and his coming from a 3-4 defense. A lot of us didn't know where he would be playing right away because of his exceptional pass rushing skills, and he's never fit into a 4-3 defense. Like you said, though, Lemur is in a battle with Sean Porter and Vontaze Burfict on the weak side. More pass coverage skills are needed on the weak side. The thing with Harrison that's interesting is he'll probably be the starter, I would think, unless Malaluga moves over there on the strong side. But with Harrison, he's versatile enough that he'll still be on the field in passing situations. We've seen it already in OTAs. He's moved over to Mike to rush the passer. So I understand the confusion with Harrison and his position because, honestly, he could probably line up at any of them. But if we're talking on a percentage of where he'll take the majority of his snaps, it will be on the strong side, whereas Lemur is on the weak side. I think Lemur, as we've already touched on, does have the skills and the necessary development to win out. And since the coaching staff is going to put the best three linebackers on the field or more with Harrison's versatility on the field at the same time. So for me, to answer the question in a strange kind of way, yes, Lemur does have a chance of winning out on that side. But watch for Harrison to potentially do battle with Malaluga on the strong side. Sticking with the defense here, and Rob, once again, thank you very much, Rob. He wants to know if you had to guess who the Bengals re-signed between Carlos Dunlap and Michael Johnson, who would you pick? Right now, and without hesitation, the pick for me is Carlos Dunlap for a multitude of reasons. For one, Michael Johnson is coming off of a franchise tag that I think paid him in the neighborhood of $11 million, meaning if Cincinnati has to, or wants to re-sign him, rather, if they want to re-sign him, the first year of the contract's going to have to start in the neighborhood of $12 million. And you're looking at an offseason right now where they need to extend a guy like Geno Atkins, and then next offseason extend guys like Andy Dalton and A.J. Green. For me, Johnson represents a financial risk that they don't want to have to take in the long term, and that's why they drafted a guy who's essentially a physical clone in Marcus Hunt. Reason number two is Carlos Dunlap is absolutely filled with unlimited potential that we have yet to see be fully tapped, and I think that's something the coaching staff can do over time. He's still not officially the starter at his side on the defensive end because he doesn't take the majority of the snaps. He's replaced by guys like Robert Gathers in running situations because he has yet to prove that he can, A, stay healthy, and B, hold up against the run. So Dunlap's eligible for an extension right now, but you're not going to see it until next offseason. But I would be willing to bet a lot of money that it is Dunlap and not Johnson who gets the extension next offseason. Sean, your thoughts on the defensive end contract status?
Man, can I just say I agree? Because, yeah, you basically covered it all right there. That's practically everything that I would have said about that whole situation. Yes, Carlos Dunlap is my choice right there, and for all of the same reasons, really, that Chris just mentioned. So I quite honestly don't have anything else to add to that. I'm just going to tuck my tail between my legs and move on to the next question. Chris, nicely done. So, yes, sir. So, again, and this is our last mailbag question, again from Rob, and I want to plug Rob one more time because we threw the whole mailbag segment out there on Twitter a little late this week, actually just not too long before we're recording the show, and Rob kind of came through in the clutch and just threw these questions at us, and we're thankful that he did because, we love doing the mailbag segment and we love interacting with everyone. So thank you again, Rob, for your questions, your very good questions that you're sending us. So again, Rob Bergeron at Robert Bergeron, Bergeron, on Twitter. Great fan, very smart guy, asks great questions. Give him a follow. And the last question from Rob is, do you think Dre Kirkpatrick starts sometime this year due to merit, not injury? So basically, Rob's thinking that quite possibly because of Kirkpatrick's status as a former first-round pick, that he might be able to see some playing time because of that instance rather than because of an unfortunate injury, maybe, to a guy like Leon Hall or Terrence Newman. And, that's a very good question, and it's a loaded question, and yes, it's very possible. And I think that my answer to this question is yes, because I do think that the Bengals need to see what they have in Dre Kirkpatrick moving forward. Even if Leon Hall and Terrence Newman are playing very well as the top two corners on the team, Newman's not getting any younger, and the Bengals will have to look for his replacement, potentially by the end of this season. And they need to know if Dre Kirkpatrick is going to be that guy. So I would say yes, if Dre Kirkpatrick strings together a couple of weeks of some really good practices and he's showing no setbacks from his previous injuries, I think that the Bengals coaching staff could be in agreement to plug him in opposite Leon Hall and, see what they have out of the former first-round selection. Chris, what are your thoughts on this one?
For me, Dre Kirkpatrick is a starter across from Leon Hall, not on merit, but because of ability. His man-to-man skills and exceptional athleticism are the perfect fit in the confines of Mike Zimmer's 4-3 defense, and that's something you want on the field. Whereas a guy like Terrence Newman has struggled at times in the past in coverage simply because of a thing called age. I think Kirkpatrick is your starter unless he injures himself in the preseason, which, God forbid, that won't happen because Cincinnati's already experiencing injuries once again with Adam Jones tweaking his calf and now having off-field issues. So for me, ability pencils in Kirkpatrick as the starter right now, but I do think that you're going to see him see playing time either way because of injury. We've already got the Adam Jones injury, and then you look at Leon Hall was injured a couple years ago, and Terrence Newman is getting up there in age, and the two guys behind them in Sean Prater and Brandon Gee have been injured in the past and haven't been able to stay healthy. So either way, Kirkpatrick's a starter. Inevitably, it'll be because of injury, but I think it's because of his ability. And, folks, that'll do it for our Twitter mailbag segment. We want to thank you all again, especially Mr. Rob, for sending in so many great questions. Make sure you guys give us a follow at BengalsCentral on Twitter and shoot us your questions all week up until, we'll say, Tuesday at 5 p.m., and we'll answer them live on the show like we just did.
Absolutely. Keep sending us your questions. As you can tell, Chris and I, we really do like this mailbag segment, and our main purpose here is to make sure everyone is enjoying the show. So we want to interact with everyone as much as possible, whether it is through Twitter or asking us questions on the mailbag. So please find us at BengalsCentral on Twitter, and let us know what you think of the show, or let us know that you want me to sing again if I have another interview coming up or whatever it is. I guess fans that only caught the last episode with Reggie Kelly would get that one. Hi, Chris.
Previously on Bengals Central Radio Show.
Great. And I got to say that, people should definitely go over to your website at Kyvan82.com because I was there before the show because I kind of wanted to check all this out for myself. Me being up in Pennsylvania, I was kind of unfamiliar with what you had going on. And I got to tell you, it's worth it alone to go to the website for the theme song. Just for the theme song, it's worth it alone. Obviously, check out the products there. But I like the theme song. I think it was catchy. If they had more stuff like that on the radio, I think I'd be more inclined to buy the products that I heard advertised. That was good stuff.
Well, Sean, you know what? I'm gonna put you on the spot since you really like the theme song so well. I want to hear you give me your rendition of it. Go ahead and give me a little.
Oh man, I don't know if I can do that.
I'm putting you on the spot right now. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, man.
You got it. You heard it here.
That's right. Oh man, these guys are going to give me a lot of flack for this, but that's fun though, man. But anyway, shameless plug time. Remember to check out our sponsor, Onnit.com, by clicking their banner on the Bengals Central page on ProFootballCentral.com. This will get you 15% off your next purchase on their website. So we'd like to thank everyone for tuning in this week. Special thanks goes out once again to Mike Hoag of Dawg Pound Central, the new Cleveland Browns podcast on the Pro Football Central radio network. We're very happy to have them aboard, and you can find them on Twitter at Dawg Pound Central. That's DAWGPND Central. And it was a great interview with Mike Hoag. We really appreciate that he was on the show. So be sure to scour the entire catalog of the radio network shows on ProFootballCentral.com for your latest news on every NFL team. For Chris Rawling, I am Sean O'Donnell. Hooday.
The following podcast is a part of the Pro Football Central Podcast Network. Check us out at ProFootballCentral.com.
Tonight is back in the orange and black. See the natty on the map, baby, tell me where you at. In the jungle, who they bringing it back to the jungle. Every game day, yeah, the jungle's back. Got the natty pack in the orange and black. We're stacked to the track, so I'm back behind long work, chugging down cases. And a can brewed in 88. Who they? Super Bowl, spirit of the icky shuffle. Feel it rumble through the king of the jungle. Thunderous roar, he will soar across the river to the Newport shore. The Fountain Square, the great American ballpark. Down at the banks above the riverfront graveyard. The Paul Brown Stadium, the Nat is awakened. And we're making a statement to the rest of the nation. Cincinnati's back in the orange and black. See the natty on the map, baby, tell me where you